Gas exchange. All right, so we're going to go through, in the next several lectures, we're going to talk a lot about the circulatory system, the respiratory system, and the digestive system, because they are so very much interconnected with each other. All animals must respire. You must move gases into and out of your lungs. Now, in general, what gas do you want to bring into your lungs? Oxygen. And what gases do you want to expel from your lungs? Carbon dioxide. Why do you want to bring oxygen in? What cellular process is so very important that requires oxygen? Aerobic cellular respiration, exactly. So we've learned about gas exchange in different organisms. We talked about like how gills exchange gas when we talked about crustaceans. We talked about how flatworms just diffuse gases across their membrane. Now we're going to really delve into humans as a model organism. So, big picture. Oxygen has to get into the cells so cellular respiration can occur. At the same time, you need to remove carbon dioxide from the cells before they build up to be a toxic waste product. So, you need to get oxygen to the cells while removing carbon dioxide from the cells. We've got a very, I won't say complex process, but we have an efficient process for making this happen. Basically, here's the process. We go, oxygen gets into the lungs. That lung, from the lung, the oxygen gets transferred to a carrier cell. That carrier cell is, in us, red blood cells. From the carrier cell, it goes to the cell. In the cell, the oxygen is used for aerobic cellular respiration, and a waste product, carbon dioxide, is produced. That carbon dioxide then diffuses to the carrier cell. The carrier cell goes to the lung, where it drops off the carbon dioxide that then gets expelled back to the environment. It's all about moving gases using a carrier cell. And what's the carrier cell that's in our body? Do you remember? Major carrier cell in the body that carries oxygen to and from places. It's a bunch of tubes in you. What cell in your, really? You guys don't know this? Maybe I'm saying it totally wrong. What cell in your body moves oxygen from one place to another? Red blood cells, yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was like, you guys must have been like, oh, that can't be the right answer, it's too easy. So I'm going to go through this process in depth. Let's talk about air. That's this stuff out here. Air is kind of interesting because it's made up of all sorts of different things. It's made up of gases, sure, but it's not pure oxygen. If it was pure oxygen, it would explode all the time. And that would not be cool. There are lots of microscopic organisms in the air, little droplets of water that are carrying maybe infections, some funguses definitely out in the air. You got a whole bunch of stuff in the air that could hurt you. And you also have some very important stuff in the air, like oxygen, that you need. So your body has to separate out the good stuff from the bad stuff. And it all starts with the nose. The nose is kind of important, as you can imagine. It is the body's first line of defense for filtering out the air. It's an extremely efficient filter. When you're looking at the nose, not this guy's nose, but if you're looking at the nose, let's look up the nose. The first thing you see are nose hairs. Their job is to stop macroorganisms from going up your nose. Not kidding you, that's their role, is to basically filter out the huge stuff. I don't know, you have likely in your life at some point gone through a cloud of gnats and you probably hated it. They get in your eyes, you might swallow them, it tastes terrible, you know. But the big thing is, if they were to try to go up your nose, they'd have a very difficult time doing it because of those nose hairs. So the nose hairs trap large objects. This is my awesome picture. You then have the nasal cavity. So you've got all these nose hairs at the front. Air gets pulled in, and then you have all these twists and turns. Twists and turns, as we know, are good for what? Surface area, right? In this case, these twists and turns act as a very large twisting maze. As air comes through, it's going to encounter all of these turns. Throughout there's going to be mucus that's being constantly moved by cilia. Remember what cilia are? Yeah, okay. So it's those hairs that are basically constantly moving on unicellular organisms, right? Well, you've got them all through your nose. So as air comes through, microorganisms, particulates, pollen will land in the mucus, and then steadily it gets stuck. That mucus is going to be pushed backwards to the back of your nose. You guys heard of nasal irrigation? People say you should take some sort of like sterile water, stick it up your nose, like pour it through one side and out the other in order to flush it out. I am terrified of nasal irrigation. I'm scared of a lot of things. This is coming up in this class. Nasal irrigation bothers me because we've talked about Naegleria fowleri, I think, in here before, right? The brain-eating amoeba. Basically, to me, if you're using tap water that's warm and isn't sterile, you're just saying, hey, amoeba, this is directly my nose, and here's my optic nerve, touch it, grab on, and eat my brain.
Yeah, but that's natural selection.
That's natural selection. There you go. So I wouldn't use nasal irrigation, but you know, you do you. If you do it right, using pure sterile water,
Yeah, like boxes.
that's
Literally said get store-bought water.
buy store-bought water. Yes.
What about tea?
What about tea? Don't put tea up your nose either. Like,
It also cleanses.
it sure. You know what? You guys can do whatever you want. Make sure it's not boiling, probably.
Yeah.
Right? My mom told me I needed to do nasal irrigation. She's like, you sound stuffed up. Do this nasal irrigation thing. I'll show you how. I was like, no, Mom. That's where I draw the line.
Do you ever do those like bird light shirts?
No, I haven't.
And shirts you literally put them over the bridge of your nose? Like, some laboratory.
Basically, if you get a particulate up your nose, it's going to land in the mucus, and that cilia is going to push it back to the back of the throat, where it's going to drop down. And where does your throat lead? Your stomach. And what's the conditions like in your stomach? Right? They're very low pH, so that's going to be where material gets digested. So, first line of defense, any large particulate matter will get stuck in the nasal cavity, pushed to the back of the throat, and sent down to the stomach for processing. Yes?
I have a question. Why did you draw the images?
Because I couldn't. So why did I draw these images and not find like good images?
Well, no, yes.
Yeah. So the reason I did that was because I tried very hard for these lectures to make it so that everything was copyright free. Because there was some concern that, oh no, if you use a book thing from a textbook, you are locked into that textbook forever. Like if I use the stuff from your textbook, I'd have to always use your textbook, or I'd have to stop using that image. So I said I don't want to use the textbook forever and ever and ever, or redo my lectures all the time. So I drew my own. Thank you. The net results of this air getting pushed in through your nose is you get warm, moist, clean air. It doesn't have any particulates in it getting past your throat. Now that's if you're breathing through your nose. What if you breathe through your mouth? Because you can do that too. You don't have nearly as much filtration. You still have mucus along the throat. Particulates land in the throat, and they'll eventually get pushed down into the stomach. But you may get some going to your lung as well. Now that we're past the nose, we enter into the trachea. You go from the sinus through the trachea, where you get more mucus, more cilia gets traps any remaining particulates, and they still keep getting pushed down to your stomach. Right after your trachea, you have a flap of cartilage called the epiglottis. This is where it's going to sort of open or close to allow air to go to the lung, or it'll close that one track and then open up for food to go to the stomach. It's not going to be open for both at the same time. Yes?
How far down does the tongue go?
You know, I don't know, but I don't think it doesn't go like super far down. And we did just dissect a pig where, You know, you saw that that tongue is actually longer than you think it is, but it doesn't like go all the way down your throat. It's not like you're an anteater.
Did you know that the epiglottis has epiglottal reflex that is very commonly used in children?
No.
It is a stimuli that is induced by like falling, which is why if you like drop a kid into a pool,
They closes it. You get past the epiglottis, you get to the lungs. When the surface area of the lungs increases, so that is the lungs expand because of a muscle, the diaphragm pulling down, the lungs expand out, it's going to increase surface area and draw air through the nose. This is, I guess, the PSA of healthy lung versus tobacco lung. It's not a good idea to smoke because then you don't live as long. So far, so good? You'll notice that your chest moves, but your lungs don't actually do any moving on their own. Your lungs don't have muscles in themselves. Instead, a combination of the rib cage expanding out because of the muscles in the rib cage and the diaphragm pulling down are going to be what causes your lungs to expand. Basically, you change the amount of pressure in your chest cavity, and that expands the lungs. When the lungs expand, that becomes a vacuum, and it pulls air in. When the lungs contract, it pushes air out. So far, so good? So now we've got air in our lungs. You're moving down into the lungs. There's going to be you got two lungs, surprise. So there's a split, the bronchi. They're going to break down into the bronchioles. And the bronchioles, so this is, you get one big pipe, and then you get a lot of little pipes. And those little pipes end with these structures called alveoli. Alveoli look like little grapes, yes?
So what causes a person to go from automatic breathing to manual breathing all the time?
As in they have to think about, that's some sort of neurological condition. I mean, as far as I know. That's not you, is it?
No, it is.
Really? You have to think about breathing? That is so cool. I mean, it sucks to be you, but wow. No, there's some other neurological condition there. So at first, so air goes into the bronchi, then the bronchioles, and then to these really small grape-like alveoli. And those alveoli are where the fun happens. Like I said, a little bunch of the grapes, and they're wrapped up with these capillaries. So blood is flowing through the capillaries surrounding the balls. In the balls, you're going to have gases. This is the critical part. Remember, membranes are permeable to gas. So gases can diffuse from an area of high concentration in the alveoli to low concentration in the cells that are wrapping around it. So high concentration of oxygen on the inside, low concentration in the blood cells, diffusion occurs. At the same time, a high concentration of carbon dioxide in these blood cells is going to get transferred into the alveoli just through diffusion. It's passive. So the alveoli is where the magic happens because of diffusion of gases. Questions? So blood becomes central to this because blood is what we're going to use as our primary carrier. Blood moving through the alveoli is a mixture of plasma and a whole bunch of different types of cells. We always think red blood cells. So if you look at blood, a good portion is the red blood cells, some is the white blood cells, but more than half of it is just this solution of plasma. Red blood cells are unnucleated. That is, they do not have their own nucleus. But they contain very, very high levels of a protein called hemoglobin. Hemoglobin's job, there's a picture of hemoglobin. You'll notice that there's a green, 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 green. Each of those green sites is where it can carry an oxygen molecule. So each of these proteins can have 4 oxygen molecules, and the red blood cell is filled up with these proteins. They're little baskets to carry oxygen around. So red blood cells take oxygen from the lungs to the cells, and they take carbon dioxide from the cells back to the lungs. Their job is just carrying things. We produce about 2 million blood cells per second by the by the stem cells that are in your bone marrow. If you don't have bone marrow, you're not able to efficiently produce red blood cells. And this is where leukemia becomes so much of a problem. You need blood cells. If you don't, you can't transport oxygen and waste through your body. That could lead to, you might need lots of infusions of blood if you can't produce enough on your own. For the most part, we can. We can produce about 2 million a second. Those blood cells last about a third of a year, 120 days, before they wear out. And when they wear out, they get recycled by your spleen. That is, when people are like, oh, my spleen, though its primary role is to recycle blood cells. Blood will travel through the body. Now we're talking about the circulatory system in these tubes known as arteries if they are moving away from the heart, or veins if they're moving to the heart. So arteries carry oxygenated blood away from the heart, and veins carry them to the heart. Yeah, okay, I do. I always think about it like traffic, and which is what this next slide's going through, but I'm going to talk about it here. When you've got a big, wide, 5-lane road, you can move much faster than you can on a 1-lane road. Does that make sense? I assume. Right, you get stuck behind something on a one-way street or on a 2-lane road that you wouldn't necessarily get stuck behind on a 5-lane because you could pass. So here they're moving very quickly, but as they go into these side streets, they slow down a lot. And as they slow down, those gases can diffuse out to the cells around them. So this is where, I mean, there's gases diffusing here, but they're moving very fast. You can do a circuit of the body, and I think it's 60 seconds, 2 circuits. So basically through the heart twice. No, through the lungs twice. Anyways. But then you end up turning off, going into these side streets, and slowing down. That allows for a lot of diffusion of oxygen into the red blood cells and oxygen out of the red blood cells and carbon dioxide into the red blood cells. So that then they get back to the vein on the other side and they start moving back toward the lungs and the heart. It's all about slowing down to allow for diffusion to occur. In those big arteries and the big veins, you're getting some diffusion, but they're moving so fast that you're not getting a lot of diffusion. It's almost like if you filled up a leaky bucket and you ran really fast with it, you'd only lose a little bit of water compared to when you get stuck behind somebody else carrying that bucket. Then it just starts dumping everything at your feet. Of course, we do need a pump to get all this going, and that pump is the heart. The heart moves blood throughout the body by pumping. It doesn't actually look like this Valentine. It looks more like this. There's been lots of things, lots of studies that came out, myths about the Valentine. That heart shape is caused by, if you took 2 hearts and put them next to each other. I have no idea if they're true. Basically, that's what a heart looks like. Looks like a tongue because it's a muscle, just like a tongue. The heart is divided into 2 halves. So left half, right half, which is divided into 2 chambers. The chambers are the atrium. I don't know that any of you have ever taken Latin before or knew anything about the Roman houses, but you always enter into a Roman house in the atrium. That's where blood enters. The ventricle is where blood gets pushed out of the heart. So the atrium, blood comes in, ventricle, you push the blood out. You got 2 sides. The right side of the heart pumps blood carrying waste to the lungs. The left side pumps blood carrying oxygen to the cells. And left and right are kind of hard to figure out in in the heart, because if I was to talk about my heart, the right side, the right ventricle of my heart is actually located on the left side of my body. Right? Because doctors are nice. The reason that happened is because when doctors labeled the parts of the heart, they were looking at a cadaver. So they said the right side is the doctor's right, not the cadaver's right. So you always talk about right and left as if you're looking at a body on a table, not looking at your own self. Right, correct, yeah. So it takes about 60 seconds to get from the heart, from the lungs and back to the lungs in about 60 seconds, and in that time it passes through the heart 2 times, which is pretty quick. Especially considering all the twists and turns that you have through the capillaries, the veins, and the arteries, all the surface area that's covering. It's very, very quick. It's also why if you were to cut a capillary, you don't have a lot of bleed out. A paper cut, you don't spurt blood all over the place. But if you were to cut yourself on a vein or worse, an artery, you'd have a lot of blood coming out very, very quickly. So if you want to kill someone quickly, hit an artery or a vein. If you want to kill them slowly, make sure you miss the veins and arteries and get them lots of paper cuts right along their capillaries. Cool?